Thunderbirds first launched onto British television in 1965, and for many fans remains the pinnacle of the Gerry Anderson legacy.
Any more information?
The series centered around the exploits of International Rescue, a global response organization founded by billionaire ex-astronaut Jeff Tracy on a beautiful island somewhere in the Pacific. His 5 sons, each named after a real-life astronaut, took control of the 5 Thunderbirds machines, a fleet of rescue craft designed by the engineering genius Brains.
Your phenomenal mind made all this possible. Now you're going to see it in operation.
These included Thunderbird 1, a hypersonic rocket piloted by Scott.
International Rescue doesn't give up that easy.
Thunderbird 2, the heavy transporter piloted by Virgil.
Approaching danger zone.
Thunderbird 3, the space rocket flown by Alan.
Well, I do take Scott with me as a rule.
Thunderbird 4, a submarine operated by Gordon.
Relax, will ya?
And Thunderbird 5, an orbiting space satellite we most often saw manned by John.
Wowee, that's serious.
Other regular characters on Tracy Island included Jeff Tracy's mother, Grandma, engineer Tintin, and her father Kirano, while deep in the Malaysian jungle, Kirano's sinister half-brother the Hood plots his latest diabolical scheme to capture International Rescue's secrets.
I shall be invincible!
Jeff Tracy could also call on a worldwide network of agents to assist in operations, but the most often seen were British agent Lady Penelope Crichton-Ward and her faithful manservant Parker, who carried out their missions in style in the famous pink Rolls-Royce Fab 1.
Home, milady?
Home, Parker.
Whenever disaster strikes, be it an accident or deliberate sabotage, it's
Thunderbirds are go.
And if the situation requires specialized rescue equipment, Thunderbird 2's pod will always be carrying exactly what is needed to save trapped people or stop a runaway machine.
These International Rescue boys sure have some great equipment. Yeah.
Originally planned as a series of half-hour episodes, the Thunderbirds format was expanded to a full hour on the orders of ITC head Lou Grade, who was extremely impressed by what he saw in the opening episode, Trapped in the Sky.
We're not gonna make it! We're running out of runway!
Right from the start, the series promised and delivered action and spectacle on the scale of a feature film, and continued to do so throughout its first season. The longer running time now allowed for a greater emphasis on the characters and their relationships, as well as action and excitement. And viewers also got to spend time getting to know each episode's guest characters before they were thrown into mortal danger.
Maybe we can get through to International Rescue. If anyone can help us, they can.
Despite this greater emphasis on character, the show's star attractions were always the machines, with both the Thunderbirds craft and guest vehicles alike lingering in the minds of viewers long after the program had ended.
That's a great aircraft.
The show's format of disasters and rescues enabled the writers to come up with more exciting and action-packed scenarios than ever before, with the special effects and model department then realizing those ideas on a scale that even today still stands as some of the best work ever produced for television.
A fine piece of filming.
Along with dynamic vocal performances from the cast,
You've got to locate them within the next 2 minutes.
and a stirring brassy musical score from Barry Gray, every element of Thunderbirds came together almost perfectly to produce a series that very quickly became a hit with audiences worldwide. Crucially, it managed to capture the attention of adults as well as children, which perhaps made paying for the flurry of merchandising that came along with the show slightly more bearable.
What's the next move?
Thunderbirds was now an international phenomenon, and it only made sense to transfer that success to the big screen.
Action!
1966 saw the release of the movie Thunderbirds Are Go, which was expected to be a box office sensation, but things didn't turn out that way.
I can only think that it was because at that time people weren't used to seeing television productions turned into feature films.
Alongside the film, a second season of the television series was also being shot, but this was to be cut short after just 6 episodes when Thunderbirds was cancelled following a failed attempt to sell the series to an American network.
I won't believe it. I just can't.
Believing that this sale was crucial to the show making its money back, Lou Grade ordered that Anderson and his team should instead get to work on another brand new series. Thunderbirds had come to a sudden and unexpected end, but the exploits of International Rescue were not over yet. A second feature film, Thunderbird 6, was to follow in 1968. Albeit to similar public indifference as the first, yet the television series continued to endure in the memories of fans. Over the next 20 years, nostalgia continued to grow, and in 1991 the series was repeated on BBC Two, resulting in a massive resurgence of interest that at times seemed to almost exceed that from the original 1960s showings. Another equally successful repeat run followed in the early 2000s, along with a live-action big-screen adaptation in 2004 that proved popular with children but controversial among fans, including Gerry Anderson himself. The film was a box office flop, but continual interest in the original television series has lasted well into the 21st century.
Well, that's just great.
The concept has recently been revived again in the form of CGI remake Thunderbirds Are Go, and to mark the show's 50th anniversary, a trilogy of new Supermarionation episodes were produced in 2015, which adapted 3 audio stories from the 1960s using the original puppetry and model techniques of the classic television show.
How do you like that?
I like it very much, Jeff.
More than 50 years after it first appeared on our screens, Thunderbirds continues to thrill and delight audiences young and old around the world.
And that's how it's gonna be. Always.
Its unique blend of high-action adventure and magic of the ever-appealing puppets and models makes it an almost perfect family show. Although it only ran for 32 episodes, the series has become an enduring television phenomenon, and it will no doubt continue to inspire and entertain for at least another 50 years.
FAB.
Thunderbirds Are Go was released in 1966 and saw the puppet stars of Gerry Anderson's smash hit television series Thunderbirds make the giant leap onto the big screen for the first of 2 feature films.
Thunderbirds Are Go!
Written by the Andersons themselves and directed by David Lane, the film follows the Tracy family of International Rescue as they provide security for the launch of Zero X, a mammoth spacecraft that will carry mankind to Mars for the very first time. Despite the very best efforts of the Hood to sabotage the project, Zero X successfully makes it to the Red Planet.
I've always been fascinated by that phrase, life as we know it. I have a feeling that we may encounter life as we don't know it.
Where the crew encounters alien life in the form of the deadly rock snakes. 6 weeks later, disaster strikes again as Zero X re-enters Earth's atmosphere, and International Rescue must once more spring into action as they race to rescue the crew before the ship crash lands.
They have an escape unit failure. Unless we can get the crew and passengers out before that aircraft hits the ground, they are all doomed men.
Thunderbirds Are Go was actually announced to the press before the first episode of the series had even aired, and the subsequent runaway success of the television show almost guaranteed that the film would be a surefire box office smash.
Don't let your imagination run riot.
With a second season of the television series also being produced alongside the film, a drastic expansion of the AP Film Studio machine would be required to handle the extra workload, and the company purchased 2 more buildings on the Slough trading estate, bringing their total to 5.
There are 5.
In particular, much time was spent preparing the puppets and rebuilding sets and vehicles to ensure that they would stand up to scrutiny when projected onto a large cinema screen. As a result, many of the shots of the puppets are framed to avoid showing their wires, and on the rare occasion any of them actually walk in this film, their legs are kept firmly out of shot.
Yes, sir.
This increased attention to detail also came with a greater realism when it came to the film's guest vehicle, the Zero X, and many of its sets.
What a magnificent sight.
The Glenfield control tower set and the two-colour SEC conference room set look like something out of a Bond film, while Alan's dream sequence halfway through the movie delivers a little bit of Hollywood glitz and glamour, even if it is largely unnecessary.
Sorry, Dad.
The film would also feature an expansion of the regular Thunderbirds voice cast, mostly to provide the voices of the Zero X crew, and several of these actors would return in future Anderson productions. Most notably, the film and the second season of the television show marked the point at which Jeremy Wilkin took over the role of Virgil Tracy from David Holliday.
Are you game?
I sure am.
In previous series, it wasn't unusual for a puppet character's design to be modelled on a celebrity, but Thunderbirds Are Go would take that one step further in the form of the dream sequence midway through the film that saw Lady Penelope and Alan travel to futuristic nightclub The Swinging Star. There they would encounter the film's real-life guest stars,
None other than Cliff Richard Jr.
and the Shadows Jr.
What a terrific group.
Yes, they always play at the Swinging Star. You see, they're way out.
Cliff and the Shadows would also contribute to the film's soundtrack, and the group even recorded footage to help the puppeteers more precisely mimic their distinctive movements.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to the film's budget of at least £250,000, Barry Gray would also enjoy the luxury of a 70-piece orchestra to record the film's score, which would include one of the most popular pieces of music he would ever compose, the Zero X theme. Since the departure of Arthur Provis, whose surname had provided the P in AP Films, the company's original name had seemed more and more like a holdover from a bygone age, and now it was time to find a name that better reflected their output.
This is a tough one.
Although the film would be released through United Artists, it would also be the first Anderson production to open with the iconic Century 21 sting that would remain in use until the end of UFO.
Now, on the big screen, in Technicolor and Techniscope, a brand new adventure that takes you where you've never been before. Thunderbirds Are Go!
By the time Thunderbirds Are Go finally hit the big screen, the television series that spawned it had already been cancelled after a second season of just 6 episodes.
There was no violence, he just held me at gunpoint, tied me up and locked me in the missile store.
After failing to secure a US network deal, Lou Grade felt that it would be easier to sell a brand new show than further episodes of an existing one, and Thunderbirds on television came to an end.
I don't think there's much point in looking for survivors, Parker.
No, milady.
However, the Century 21 team was still hopeful that this might not be as ominous as it first appeared. And when Thunderbirds Are Go was premiered at London's Pavilion Cinema on December 12, 1966, it seemed certain that they had a box office sensation on their hands.
Gee. Have some more champagne.
Perhaps Thunderbirds wasn't dead after all. Perhaps the new film would just be the first in a long line of successful Thunderbirds movies that could even rival the James Bond franchise.
What goes on around here? Have you all gone crazy?
The film's failure took everyone by surprise, even United Artists, who would soon take the unprecedented step of inviting Century 21 to begin work on a sequel, Thunderbird 6. But that's another story.
I can't possibly make it.
Don't tell me. You're afraid.
Thunderbirds Are Go received a mixed response from critics and fans alike when it was first released, and continues to do so to this day.
I have 862 pages here, sir, which say just that.
The film represents a superb technical achievement and delivers some of the most visually stunning moments of any Gerry Anderson production, but perhaps too much time is spent on the hardware.
I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
The film's biggest weakness is in forgetting that viewers had come to love the characters of the Tracy family just as much as the machines they piloted, but most of them are poorly served by this film.
As far as we're concerned, the only good publicity is no publicity.
International Rescue don't even appear for the first 20 minutes, and aren't really properly needed until the final act, as any halfway competent security force could easily fulfill the role they play in the first half.
Yes, sir, Colonel, sir.
Scott and Virgil have very little to do compared to their usual roles on television.
What about me, Father?
Well, it's unlikely that you'll be needed.
while Brains, Tintin and Gordon each only get a few lines.
Sorry, Tintin.
That's all right, Mr. Tracy. I understand.
Well, I don't.
Instead, perhaps believing him to be the most relatable of the Tracy brothers among younger viewers, the film very heavily pushes Alan as the main character at the expense of almost everyone else.
To Alan, the hero of the day.
He gets to star in his own dream sequence midway through the movie, and the film even concludes with everyone praising him for saving the Zero-X crew, even though he mostly just copied what Gordon did to save the Fireflash back in Operation Crash Dive.
Here I go again!
The film's release was accompanied by a novelization and a 4-part picture story in the TV Century 21 comic, which was soon followed up by a long-running Zero-X comic strip telling the further adventures of Captain Paul Travers and his crew.
The only thing we really want to say is, thanks.
Over on the small screen, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons debuted in September 1967, opening with a scene in which Captain Black of Spectrum discovers the Mysteron city while exploring Mars in a Zero-X MEV. This would be a rare attempt by Century 21 to cross an element of one Anderson series over into another, although such crossovers frequently occurred in the pages of TV 21.
Since the Zero-X mission to Mars, there have been a number of peculiar happenings.
But ironically, Zero-X itself rather hinders the idea of a shared continuity between the television shows. Because if all the Supermarionation series are taking place in the same universe, then how come the human race of Fireball XL5 has established bases and space stations throughout the universe, but never thought to go to Mars until this film?
We're missing something. I know we're missing something.
Thunderbirds Are Go represented something of a turning point in Gerry Anderson's career. Following the film's failure and the cancellation of the Thunderbirds television series, his Supermarionation empire would struggle to maintain cohesion without another smash hit to sustain it, and ultimately disintegrated in 1969. As a film in its own right though, Thunderbirds Are Go can perhaps be best described as a flawed gem.
What the heck are you talking about?
Its achievements are still hugely impressive more than 50 years after its release, and it remains a marvellous showcase for the work of the many talented people who made it.
And may I add my thanks and congratulations too.
Despite its flaws, the film remains a triumph for Anderson and his team, and for many fans, Thunderbirds Are Go represents the very pinnacle of the golden age of Supermarionation.
FAP?
Thunderbird 6 was released in 1968 and would be the second and final big screen outing for International Rescue.
Yeah, but what about...
No.
Let's have a rundown on Thunderbird 6.
Once again, Alan Tracy takes centre stage as he accompanies Lady Penelope, Tintin and Parker aboard the maiden flight of Skyship 1, a futuristic airship designed by Brains.
Well, it looks as if we're all set for a lovely, peaceful holiday.
Little do they realise though that the crew of the airship are imposters, working for a mysterious villain who plans to lure Thunderbirds 1 and 2 to his base in Casablanca so that he can capture them for his own ends.
If pilots offer any resistance as they leave their machines, shoot them down.
Meanwhile, Jeff Tracy has given Brains the task of designing a new international rescue vehicle.
We now need a Thunderbird 6.
Although since he doesn't know exactly what he wants the new machine to be able to do, the project isn't going very well. As the crew of Skyship 1 reveal their true natures, a gunfight damages the ship's engines, forcing it to crash into a tower over a missile base.
We need to decide a course of action, but fast. As far as I can see, any attempt to get near that ship is going to bring a disaster.
With Skyship 1 gradually becoming heavier as its turbines shut down, a way must be found to evacuate the airship's passengers before it falls from the tower. And Brains has also still got to design that Thunderbird 6 before the end of the film.
I've got a tiger in my tank.
Although Alan's vintage Tiger Moth might just provide the solution to both problems.
It's a brilliant idea!
Despite the poor box office return of 1966's Thunderbirds Are Go, both United Artists and Lou Grade felt that International Rescue deserved another chance to shine on the big screen, and agreed a budget of £300,000 for the sequel.
And now, gentlemen, the moment has come. What is it to be?
Thunderbird 6 entered production in 1967 and would be filmed alongside Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, although the puppets seen in the new film would retain the disproportionately large heads and hands seen in the original television series.
It's the only possible answer.
Once again, David Lane would handle directing duties while Gerry and Sylvia Anderson wrote the screenplay, which would take a more light-hearted tone than its predecessor.
It's going to land on its home.
And appropriately enough for the final Thunderbirds production, the film also focuses more heavily on the characters of the Tracy family and international rescue. Although somewhere along the line, Jeff has apparently relaxed security considerably, since Penelope and co quite happily tell anyone who'll listen that they're international rescue agents.
That's right, Captain Foster. We all of us lead dedicated lives in international rescue.
With the exception of Ray Barrett, who had now returned to Australia, the entire credited voice cast of the second season of Thunderbirds would return for the new film, and once again, several new actors were also hired.
As president of the New World Aircraft Corporation, this flight is of paramount importance to me.
Jeffrey Keane as NWAC President James Glenn, and John Carson as the smooth imposter Captain Foster make their only contribution to the Gerry Anderson universe with this film.
I didn't think I'd ever forget that.
But Keith Alexander and Gary Files would both be heard and seen in Anderson productions up until UFO.
Attention all defense systems. This is a maximum security alert.
Keith Alexander took over Ray Barrett's role of John Tracy.
Father, I've just received a message from Lady Penelope.
Whose change in voice goes unnoticed by his family, since they so rarely talk to him anymore anyway.
FAB, John. Keep in touch.
Gary Files, meanwhile, voices the mastermind behind the whole scheme, who operates under the codename of Black Phantom, but who also bears a strong resemblance to International Rescue's archenemy, the Hood.
If only I knew their secrets.
Many fans, and indeed Sylvia Anderson herself, maintain that this is not the Hood, but instead a son or some other relative seeking revenge for the Hood's death in the previous film, although nothing in Thunderbird 6 itself gives any definitive answer, one way or another.
Let them have it.
Considering that the Hood had survived multiple car and plane crashes throughout the Thunderbirds television series, then it isn't impossible that he could also have survived the helijet crash that appeared to finish him off in Thunderbirds Are Go. And if this isn't meant to be the Hood, then why reuse such an instantly identifiable puppet in the role of the villain?
The jigsaw's nearly completed, but not quite.
If you're going to do that, then why not let Cliff Richard be the villain instead of reducing him to an extra? Speaking of villainy, the film often exhibits a surprisingly mean-spirited streak that wouldn't be out of place in Captain Scarlet, but is entirely at odds with the usual jolliness of Thunderbirds.
Quickly, we haven't much time.
The scene in which the original crew of Skyship One are ruthlessly gunned down, their bodies later dumped at sea, is a prime example. But we can also add Alan's casual murder of one of the imposter crew during their escape from the airship, and the subsequent whimpering demise of his colleague to the list of the film's very un-Thunderbirdsy moments. Even the regulars don't escape unscathed, as two of the most popular Thunderbirds characters are treated rather shabbily here.
Upset? Me upset? Of course I'm not upset!
Throughout the film, Brains is seen uncharacteristically frustrated and angry at Jeff's continual rejections of his design for a Thunderbird 6, with Jeff being infuriatingly vague about what he's even looking for to begin with.
We desperately need a Thunderbird 6.
Poor old Parker is also made to look a fool throughout the film, most notably in a scene where Alan, Penelope and Tintin laugh about him behind his back, while he's at the door, listening in.
You should have seen Parker's face, Tintin. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Although Brains gets something of a happy ending, even being given his own International Rescue uniform for the first and only time, Parker doesn't even get an apology for the way he's been treated, and instead ends the film falling out of a tree after being presumed dead by his so-called friends, who really don't seem that upset at the thought of losing him.
I've only just realized Parker isn't with us. We must have left him aboard the airship.
It's too late now, Penny. Are you sure there was no chance of him surviving when Skyship One crashed?
Not a chance, Ellen.
The globe-trotting storyline of Thunderbird 6 allows plenty of opportunity for the Century 21 team to show off their skill in designing multiple sets and models for each location, everything from an Indian market to an inn in the Swiss mountains. And many of the rooms aboard Skyship 1 are similarly striking.
Down the crows.
The film also delivers many appealing visual sequences, and the destruction of the missile base near the end of the film is one of the most spectacular Anderson moments of all time. At the other end of the beauty spectrum, we have the film's pre-title sequence, a scene in which Brains lays out his idea for Skyship 1, only to be greeted by, well, this. Although meticulously sculpted right down to their tongues and fillings, these laughing heads rolling around and shrieking are one of the most unintentionally terrifying things ever committed to film, and appropriately, this is the only Gerry Anderson moment to have earned the dubious distinction of becoming an internet meme. By the end of the film, Jeff Tracy would finally have his oh-so-important Thunderbird 6, in the form of Alan's Tiger Moth.
Brain, you old son of a gun.
For many of the sequences featuring the aircraft, a full-size Tiger Moth was piloted by Joan Hughes, who had flown Spitfires and Lancasters during the Second World War and was one of Britain's first female pilots.
She's what?
However, during a scene in which she had to fly the Tiger Moth under a bridge on the then unfinished M40 motorway, a sudden crosswind and the extra weight of the dummies strapped to the aircraft meant she was unable to keep her wheels on the ground as the law required for such a stunt. Hughes and production manager Norman Foster found themselves in court over this in March 1968.
How dreadful.
But after a 2-day hearing, the case was dismissed with the defendants found not guilty.
So you don't think there's anything to worry about, Penelope?
No.
The incident gained the film some attention in the media, but not enough to prevent another lackluster box office opening and a lukewarm critical response.
I don't like the sound of it, Dad.
Despite being completed in December 1967, Thunderbird 6 wouldn't premiere until July 29th the following year.
Thunderbirds are back on the cinema screen in a brand new space-age adventure in Technicolor and Technoscope, revealing to the world for the first time their latest, most closely guarded top secret.
By which time, public interest in Thunderbirds and Supermarionation generally was in decline.
We've no idea what's going on.
The third film in the Thunderbirds trilogy that Lou Grade had agreed with United Artists before the television series had even aired was permanently shelved.
What's the point?
And there would be no further adventures from the original Thunderbirds team.
The end product just doesn't justify the cost.
Over the years, Thunderbird 6 has received a mixed response from fans of the show.
Well, I guess we've seen a lot of launchings, but this'll beat all.
Many appreciate its greater focus on the show's characters and more light-hearted tone, despite the occasional moment of darkness, although others would argue that by the end of Thunderbird 6, the original Thunderbirds concept had been diluted to such an extent that much of its appeal had been lost. However, if the Thunderbird saga had to come to an end, then Thunderbird 6 is overall a fine note to go out on.
Launch Thunderbird 6.
The film makes good use of many of the show's characters, and the story delivers some spectacular moments that are superbly realised by the Century 21 team in this one final visit to the original Tracy Island.